Grand Admiral Vexthor of the Kryvax Empire stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his flagship's crystalline viewport offering a perfect view of the blue planet below. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied Earth, a world that had become increasingly troublesome in galactic affairs. The Kryvax had civilized hundreds of species across the cosmos, bringing order to chaos through their superior technology and rigid social structure. Earth would be no different. "Open the communication channels," he commanded, his translator converting his clicking speech into standard Galactic. "Let us enlighten these primitives." Ambassador Maya Rodriguez sat in the United Earth Council chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the massive Kryvax fleet that had appeared in orbit. Unlike her predecessors, she didn't seem concerned about the 300 warships hovering above Earth's major cities. Instead, she was completing a crossword puzzle. The alien transmission cut through all Earth's communications networks. Grand Admiral Vexthor's image appeared on every screen, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the ship's lights. "People of Earth," he began, mandibles twitching with practiced precision, "your chaotic civilization has drawn the attention of the Kryvax Empire. We bring order to disorder, peace to conflict, and wisdom to ignorance. Your resistance is unnecessary, we have already won." Maya finished writing in hubris across her puzzle and finally looked up. "Interesting premise," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Have you checked your research on Earth's history with first contact scenarios?" Vexthor's secondary eyes blinked in confusion. This wasn't the reaction the protocol predicted. Where was the fear? The desperate pleading? The hasty military response? "Our analysis is complete," he stated. "Your species requires guidance. The Kryvax Empire will dash." "One moment," Maya interrupted, pulling up a holographic display. "Let me share something with you." The display showed a list of alien civilizations that had attempted to conquer Earth. Each entry ended with a status update: currently attending human cultural appreciation seminars, voluntarily disbanded their empire, requested Earth's assistance in societal restructuring. Vexthor chittered in annoyance. "Your psychological warfare is primitive. We have conquered dash." "Not conquered," Maya corrected. "You've civilized. There's a difference. Conquering implies you actually had to fight someone. Tell me, Admiral, in all your civilizing missions, how many species actually resisted?" The question hung in the air like a trap about to spring. Vexthor felt a sudden unease he couldn't explain. "None," he admitted. "They all saw the wisdom of our ways." Maya smiled, the kind of smile that had preceded the fall of empires. "Then you have no experience with actual resistance. How fascinating." She turned to her colleagues in the chamber. "Should we show them how Earth handles unwanted visitors?" The council members, representing nations across the globe, shared knowing looks. Some were already typing on their devices. Others simply sat back, as if preparing to watch their favorite entertainment program. "You have one planetary rotation to surrender control," Vexthor declared, trying to regain the initiative. "After that, we will begin our civilization protocols." "Noted," Maya replied, that same unsettling smile never leaving her face. "Would you like to know what we've already done?" The Grand Admiral's mandibles twitched. "Done? You have done nothing. Our sensors show no military mobilization, no weapon systems activated, no dash." "Check your ship's entertainment systems," Maya suggested. Confused, Vexthor gestured to his communications officer. The alien's multiple limbs flew across the control panel, then froze. "Sir," the officer's voice quavered, "all our ships, they're playing something called cat videos." The first cracks in the Kryvax Empire's perfect order were about to appear, and Earth hadn't fired a single shot. The real resistance was just beginning. Grand Admiral Vexthor's bridge had descended into chaos. Not the obvious kind with explosions and alarms, but something far more insidious. His crew members were staring at their screens in confusion as streams of Earth's digital content began infiltrating every system on the ship. "Sir," his chief technology officer reported, all four of their arms frantically working different control panels, "they've somehow bypassed our quantum encryption." "But that's impossible. Our systems are based on mathematical principles that should take millennia to crack." "Clearly not impossible for them," Vexthor growled, watching as his fleet's perfectly synchronized formation began to drift. Small corrections that should have been automatic were failing, causing ships to slowly, almost imperceptibly, move out of alignment. "Lock down all non-essential systems." But it was too late. Through the viewing portal, he could see his mighty armada beginning to move in ways that defied military precision. One ship was slowly rotating like a lazy satellite, while another appeared to be drawing circles in space with its movement pattern. In the United Earth Council chamber, Ambassador Maya Rodriguez was hosting an impromptu tea party. Several council members had brought snacks, and someone had set up a betting pool on which Kryvak's ship would be the first to accidentally draw a smiley face with its flight pattern. "Have they tried turning it off and on again?" asked Dr. James Chen, Earth's leading xenotechnologist, while munching on a cookie. He wasn't actually worried, he had helped design the virus that was currently teaching the Kryvak's ships to dance. Maya checked her tablet. 3 times. "Each time they reboot, our systems integrate more deeply into their network. Did you know their entire empire runs on a single operating system? No redundancies, no alternative protocols. They're so convinced of their superiority that they never considered they might need a backup plan." On the main screen, they watched as the Kryvak's fleet's formation continued to deteriorate. It wasn't just their ships anymore, their internal communications were being affected. Every time a Kryvak's officer tried to give an order, their words were automatically translated into Earth Internet memes before being broadcast. "Status report." Vexthor demanded, only to hear his voice emerge from the ship's speakers saying, "Why is the rum gone?" His communications officer slumped in defeat. "Sir, we've lost control of our translation matrices. Everything we say is being reinterpreted." The admiral's mandibles clicked in frustration. This wasn't how warfare was supposed to work. Where were the weapons? The explosions? The heroic last stands? Instead, his mighty fleet was being undermined by whatever this was. "Sir," his strategic advisor interrupted, "we're detecting unusual activity in the crew quarters. The entertainment systems they're showing something called reality television." Vexthor's carapace paled. "Shut it down." "We can't, sir. And, the crew, they're watching it. Voluntarily." In the council chamber, Maya received another update. "Phase 2 is proceeding as planned," she announced to the assembled representatives. "The Kryvak's crew members are being introduced to the concept of binge-watching. Their rigid schedule-based society won't know what hit them." Dr. Chen pulled up a holographic display showing the Kryvak's fleet's internal network. Streams of Earth data were flowing through their systems like a digital flood: social media, streaming services, video games, and most devastatingly, cat videos. Their AI had analyzed the Kryvak's psychology and determined that their society, built on order and hierarchy, had no defense against the chaos of human creativity. "Their biggest mistake," Maya mused, "was assuming that because we didn't immediately fight back, we weren't resisting. They never understood that humans learned long ago that the most effective resistance doesn't always involve weapons." Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Vexthor was facing a new crisis. His crew members were beginning to ask questions. Dangerous questions. Questions like, why do we have to maintain such rigid hierarchies, and, wouldn't it be nice to have weekends off? Some had even begun using Earth expressions in their communications. "Sir," his second-in-command reported, "the engineering crew is demanding something called a coffee break, and the weapons division has started a social media group." Vexthor slumped in his command chair. In all his years of civilizing primitive species, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't fighting his fleet, they were reprogramming it, along with his entire society. Send another ultimatum, he ordered, trying to maintain some semblance of control. Tell them dash. Oh, they sent a response already, his communications officer interrupted, breaking multiple protocols about speaking out of turn. It's a single image of something called a grumpy cat with the text no. The mighty Kryvax Empire, which had civilized hundreds of worlds through force and intimidation, was learning a harsh lesson. Sometimes the most devastating resistance doesn't come from weapons or armies, but from a species that had perfected the art of cultural warfare through centuries of creating, sharing, and evolving their ideas. And Earth was just getting started. The Kryvax Empire's high command was facing an unprecedented crisis. Their mighty fleet, once the symbol of perfect order in the galaxy, had transformed into what could only be described as a floating social experiment. Grand Admiral Vexthor stood before the Emergency Holographic Council, trying to explain how Earth had managed to turn his civilization mission into a cultural revolution without firing a single shot. The situation is complicated, he reported, wincing as another ship in his fleet began broadcasting something called Karaoke Night across all frequencies. The humans have somehow weaponized their entertainment. The High Commander's image flickered with barely contained rage. Impossible. How can entertainment be a weapon? At that exact moment, the High Commander's transmission was interrupted by an Earth phenomenon known as a flash mob. Hundreds of Kryvax crew members across different ships had synchronized their movements to something called Macarena. In the United Earth Council chamber, Maya Rodriguez and her team were monitoring the situation with professional interest and barely concealed amusement. Dr. Chen's AI systems had evolved beyond simple infiltration, they were now actively adapting Earth's cultural exports to Kryvax psychology. The beauty of it, Dr. Chen explained to the council, is that we're not forcing anything on them. We're just introducing options. Their rigid hierarchy never allowed for personal choice. Now they're discovering what it means to have preferences, opinions, and, most dangerously for their empire, individual thoughts. Maya nodded, reviewing the latest reports. How's Operation Workplace Revolution going? Incredibly well, replied Lieutenant Sophia Patel, head of psychological operations. We introduced them to the concept of casual Fridays. Their entire command structure is having an existential crisis over whether formal exoskeleton polish is really necessary 7 days a week. The effects were spreading beyond the fleet. Across Kryvax-controlled space, colonies were beginning to question the Empire's strict regulations. Some had already started experimenting with dangerous Earth concepts like democracy and weekend brunch. Back on the Eternal Dominion, Vexthor was losing control of his own crew. His chief security officer had just submitted a request to start a book club, while the weapons division had transformed their daily tactical briefing into something they called a podcast. Sir, his increasingly casual second-in-command reported, the engineering crew has discovered something called remote work and is asking why they need to be physically present in the engine room when they could monitor systems from their quarters. Also, someone started a ship-wide discussion group about whether our traditional hive mind approach to problem-solving is, quote, totally last century. Vexthor's mandibles twitched uncontrollably. This is absurd. We are the Kryvax Empire. We bring order to chaos. About that, sir, the officer continued, somehow managing to lounge in a chair designed for rigid posture, have you considered that maybe a little chaos isn't such a bad thing? I mean, since we started allowing personal expression, productivity has actually increased by 47%. Turns out, happy workers are efficient workers. Who knew? The admiral stared at his officer in horror. You've been contaminated by their ideas. No sir, I've been enlightened by them. Did you know humans have something called work-life balance? It's fascinating. They actually believe you can be productive without sacrificing your personal development. On Earth, Maya received an unexpected transmission. A group of junior Krivax officers had formed something called a union and wanted to negotiate better working conditions. Including, but not limited to, the right to customize their uniform colors and permission to decorate their workstations with inspirational quotes. "They're adapting faster than we expected," Dr. Chen observed, watching as the once uniform Krivax ships began showing signs of individualization. Some crews had started painting personal logos on their hull plating. One ship had somehow acquired a giant bumper sticker reading, "My other spaceship is a UFO." Maya smiled. "That's because we're not forcing them to change. We're just showing them possibilities. Their empire was built on the assumption that order requires uniformity. We're proving that true order can emerge from individual freedom." The Krivax High Command was in chaos. Reports were flooding in from across their territory, colonies demanding local autonomy, ships declaring casual dress codes, and worst of all, a growing movement questioning whether their entire civilizing mission was just an excuse for micromanagement on a galactic scale. "We have to stop this," one commander insisted during the emergency session. "We have to, hold on, someone just sent me something called a meme. Oh, that's actually quite funny. No, focus. We have to maintain order." But it was too late. The concept of personal choice, once introduced, proved impossible to contain. The Krivax Empire had spent millennia imposing its will on others, never realizing that their greatest weakness would be their own people discovering they had a will of their own. And as their perfectly ordered society began to embrace chaos, Earth watched with satisfaction. They hadn't needed weapons to defeat the Krivax, they just needed to remind them that they were individuals capable of making their own choices. The revolution wasn't being televised, it was being streamed, shared, and liked across the galaxy. The Krivax Empire's Central Planning Committee faced their worst nightmare, a PowerPoint presentation. On every screen across their command center, Lieutenant Sophia Patel's carefully crafted slides demonstrated exactly how their civilization was being transformed by Earth's influence. The final slide, featuring a cute cat meme with the text, "Icon has democracy," seemed particularly effective at causing collective anxiety. Grand Admiral Vexthor watched in mounting horror as his once mighty fleet continued its descent into what humans called self-expression. Ships were now organizing their own events, setting their own schedules, and worst of all, starting personal blogs about their experiences. "Sir," his second-in-command announced, now wearing what appeared to be a casual Friday modified uniform with inspirational patches, "the crew has voted to rename the ship. They feel that Eternal Dominion sends the wrong message. The current frontrunner is Space Vibes Only." Vexthor's eye stalks drooped in defeat. "Voted? Since when do we vote on anything?" "Oh, that's not all," the officer continued cheerfully. "The maintenance crew has started a meditation circle, the tactical team wants to convert the weapons room into a collaborative workspace, and someone in engineering has invented something called casual gaming tournaments." On Earth, Maya Rodriguez and her team were monitoring the transformation with scientific precision. Dr. Chen's latest analysis showed that the Krivax Empire's rigid hierarchy was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted. "It's fascinating," Dr. Chen remarked, studying the data. Their society was so focused on maintaining order that they never developed antibodies against individual thought. Once we introduced the concept of personal choice, it spread like a viral video. Maya nodded, reviewing reports from across Krivax space. Colonies were declaring independence through interdependence. Ships were forming democratic flotillas. Someone had even started a galactic version of social media, where different species could share their experiences with breaking free from empire control. "The best part," Lieutenant Patel added, "is that they're doing all of this themselves. We just showed them the possibilities. They're the ones choosing to change." Back on the newly renamed Space Vibes Only, the vote had passed with overwhelming support. Vexthor faced a new crisis. His crew had discovered the human concept of work-life balance and was now demanding something called paid vacation time. "But we're in the middle of a civilization mission," he protested. About that, his second-in-command replied, scrolling through something called a wellness app on their personal device. The crew has been discussing whether forcing our way of life on others is, ethical. We're thinking maybe we should try cultural exchange instead. Did you know humans have thousands of different cuisines? We've been eating standardized nutrient paste our whole lives. The Kryvax High Command was facing similar upheavals. Their perfectly ordered society was fragmenting into something new, not chaos, as they had feared, but a more organic form of organization. Ships were developing their own cultures, colonies were establishing local governments, and everywhere, individuals were discovering the joy of having choices. "We've lost control," one commander wailed during an emergency session. They're starting book clubs. Philosophy discussions. Art workshops. Someone even suggested we should have multiple styles of uniform. Maya received an unexpected transmission from a group calling themselves the Progressive Kryvax Coalition. They wanted to negotiate not surrender, but partnership. They had discovered Earth's concept of cultural diversity and wanted to learn more about how different societies could coexist without forcing uniformity. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Chen observed. "Their entire empire is reorganizing itself from the bottom up. They're not just adopting our ideas, they're adapting them to their own needs and creating something entirely new." The transformation reached its tipping point when the Kryvax equivalent of social media exploded with a revolutionary hashtag #EmbraceTheChaos. Ships began sharing their transformation journeys, colonies posted their local culture developments, and even some high-ranking officials started personal blogs about finding themselves. Vexthor stood on his bridge, watching as his fleet, now decorated with individual ship logos and sporting various hull paint schemes, arranged itself into what the crew called an artistic formation. They claimed it represented the balance between order and chaos. "Sir," his second-in-command said gently, "the crew has another suggestion. They think maybe instead of conquering Earth, we should ask them to teach us. After all, any civilization that can defeat an empire without weapons clearly has something valuable to share." And so, the mighty Kryvax Empire, which had sought to impose order on the galaxy, found itself transformed by the very chaos it had feared. They discovered that true strength didn't come from forcing everyone to be the same, but from allowing them to be different. Earth had won not through force, but by showing that the most powerful weapon in the universe was the simple idea that individuals should be free to choose their own path. 3 months after the Kryvax Empire's attempted civilization of Earth, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The United Earth Council chamber, once prepared for war, had been transformed into something unprecedented, the first Galactic Cultural Exchange Summit. Maya Rodriguez stood at the podium, addressing a diverse audience that included reformed Kryvax officers, representatives from previously subjugated species, and even some of the Empire's former high commanders, all wearing casual business attire of their own choosing. When the Kryvax fleet arrived, she began, they expected to find a primitive civilization in need of order. Instead, they found something far more powerful, a species that had learned to thrive in diversity. Grand Admiral Vexthor, now serving as the coordinator for the newly formed Galactic Cultural Integration Committee, nodded in agreement. His formal military uniform had been replaced by an Earth-inspired suit, customized with traditional Kryvax patterns. "We came to teach," he admitted, but ended up learning the greatest lesson of all, that true civilization isn't about enforcing order, but about embracing different ways of being. The changes across former Kryvax space were remarkable. Their once uniform colonies had blossomed into unique cultural centers. The standardized architecture now featured local artistic influences. Ships that once moved in perfect formation now expressed their individuality through distinctive flying styles and personalized designs. Dr. Chen's presentation on the mathematics of chaos and innovation had become required viewing across the galaxy. The Kryvax Empire's greatest mistake, he explained to an eager audience, was assuming that order and chaos were opposites. Earth's history shows they're actually complementary forces. Our greatest achievements came not from eliminating chaos, but from learning to dance with it. Lieutenant Patel, now heading the Interspecies Communication Department, had developed a revolutionary cultural exchange program. "We're seeing something extraordinary," she reported. "Species that were once forced into uniformity are rediscovering their ancient traditions while embracing new ideas. It's creating a cultural renaissance across the galaxy." The former Eternal Dominion, still happily operating under its new name, Space Vibes Only, had become a floating university of sorts. Its halls, once silent except for military orders, now buzzed with discussion groups, art installations, and what had become inexplicably popular across multiple species, karaoke nights. "The humans didn't just resist us," Vexthor's former second-in-command explained during a packed seminar on organizational transformation. "They showed us a better way. Why conquer when you can connect? Why dominate when you can collaborate?" The galaxy was learning that Earth's apparent chaos, its of cultures, languages, and ways of life, wasn't a weakness to be corrected but a strength to be emulated. The Kryvax discovery of human concepts like weekend hobbies and personal style had sparked a revolution in how species viewed individual expression. In the council chamber, Maya shared the latest statistics. Trade between formerly isolated species had increased by 300%. Cultural exchange programs had waiting lists centuries long. The galaxy was experiencing an unprecedented period of innovation and creativity. But perhaps the most significant change, she noted, is how we view difference itself. The Kryvax came to eliminate what they saw as chaos. Instead, they learned that diversity isn't disorder, it's the source of true strength. The former empire's vast library of regulations and protocols had been transformed into an open-source database of cultural knowledge, where species could share their unique perspectives and learn from each other. The Kryvax talent for organization, freed from its rigid military application, proved invaluable in coordinating this massive exchange of ideas. Even the High Command's former headquarters had been repurposed. The imposing structure now housed the Galactic Arts and Sciences Institute, where beings from across the cosmos came to study everything from Earth's ancient philosophies to the latest developments in cross-species meme theory. As the summit drew to a close, Maya and Vexthor stood at the chamber's viewing window, watching ships from 100 worlds dance through Earth's orbit in patterns that would have given the old Empire's flight coordinators nervous breakdowns. "You know," Vexthor mused, "when we first arrived, we thought we were bringing civilization to Earth. We never realized that Earth would bring something greater to the galaxy, the understanding that true civilization isn't about making everyone the same, but about celebrating what makes each of us different." Maya smiled, watching as a former Kryvax warship, now painted in swirling pastel colors, performed what its crew insisted was an interpretive dance about the importance of work-life balance. "Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy," she said. "It's turning them into friends." And so, the species that had once sought to impose order on the galaxy had instead become champions of diversity. The Kryvax learned that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't military might or rigid hierarchy, but the simple human idea that every being had the right to choose their own path, express their own identity, and yes, occasionally spend an entire day binge-watching their favorite shows. The price of provoking Earth had indeed been high, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of destruction, it had led to transformation. Instead of conquest, it had brought connection. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.